I'm Pamela Dolan. I'm the rector, that means like the pastor here at the Church of St. Martin. And it is just wonderful to see a lot of people that I don't know here tonight, as well as some familiar faces. And I sort of jumped onto this train as it had already left the station. I was looped into the opportunity to have this wonderful book and speaker here in Davis, and I said, sure, we can do that. So I got to meet Sheri, first of all, via Zoom, and then share a meal with her tonight. And I'm just so glad, and with our wonderful connection with Peggy, who's in the audience too. So Sheri is, and how do you say your last name? Hostetler. Sheri Hostetler is the author of this book that we'll be talking about tonight. She co-founded the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery in 2014 and continues to serve on the steering committee. And I'm sure that we will get into talking about the doctrine of discovery tonight. She's the co-host of the Dismantling the Doctrine of Discovery podcast with our other speaker, who is going to be joining us via Zoom, and that is Sarah, and again, is it Augustine or Augustine? Augustine, okay. Sheri, was also one of the founders of what is now called the Inclusive Mennonite Pastors, a coalition of pastoral leaders seeking LGBTQ+ justice in the church. And she has been the lead pastor of First Mennonite Church of San Francisco since 2000. She's had writing appear in many publications, and she is a graduate of Bluffton College and Episcopal Divinity School. See, there's already interfaith ecumenical work happening here. And so you and your family live in Alameda and come from a long line of Amish and Mennonite settler farmers. And I am about 3/4 of the way through the book, and it is a fantastic read, and I'm really, really looking forward to everything that you have to share with us tonight. So welcome, Sheri.
While we're bringing up the presentation, I just want to introduce Sarah Augustine, who you now can't see because my presentation is up, but I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this amazing woman who came into my life about 10 or 11 years ago, who had already been working with a number of different Christian denominations, including the Episcopal Church, the Quakers, Methodists, to work on dismantling the doctrine of discovery. As she said to me, it is the Christian church that came up with this doctrine that has now become part of legal precedent that justified not the African slave trade as well as colonization. And it is the Christian church's imperative to dismantle it. And she has devoted her life to that. We co-founded the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery, co-wrote this book, co-host a podcast. Sarah has changed my life, and she's going to change yours if she's given half a chance, so fair warning. But she will be on shortly. Whenever Sarah and I do this dog and pony show about this book, I like to say that I learned a sermon form when I was a pretty young seminarian. It was called Bad News, Good News. It's the simplest sermon form there was, which is you talk about the bad news with which we are afflicted, and then you speak to the good news that speaks to that bad news. In this presentation tonight, I'm the bad news, and Sarah is the good news. So I just want to say that because people have different responses to this information. For some of you, it might be, well, I knew that already. Some of you might be like, oh, I suspected this was all the case. This really feels energizing to actually know what's going on. And for other people, it's like, this is really hard and intense. I did a book study of this book with my own congregation, and this one person in the book said, this is a very intense book. She said, I'm really glad I'm reading it with a bunch of people. And then I've had other people who've just been like, this has been so helpful to put these things together and to give me the truth. And I really do believe that the truth will set us free. And it is one of the reasons I felt compelled to write this book with Sarah. So let me begin this presentation. Whoopsie. I'm having trouble with the, should I just do it manually? I've done presentations of this book 3 different times where the PowerPoint doesn't want to work, which is maybe the Spirit's way of just saying, just like, forget about that stuff. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Yeah, so let me see if I can. Yeah, thank you, Gabe. I just want to say, there's the guy who does a portion of what Gabe does at my church wears a t-shirt that says, nobody knows what the AV guy does until it doesn't work. And I just want to give a hand to Gabe because I didn't realize how much we were asking. And so thank you so much, Gabe. I appreciate it. So like you, I see headlines like this all the time. And these were from a couple of years ago, actually. I don't think I need to make the case to you all here probably that climate change is happening much more quickly with more alarming consequences than scientists had predicted. It's why we're always hearing folks say, like, we have a decade or less to bring carbon emissions down, or we risk facing disaster. Now, our conventional answer to this dilemma has been green growth. Green growth holds that technology and human ingenuity can allow us to continue growing our economy while simultaneously mitigating ecological crises as a result of that growth. So we can continue extracting resources from the earth to fuel our consumption, which has to grow to have a growing economy. And we can keep polluting so long as we find ways to mitigate the effects of that pollution. This is the underlying philosophy of the Paris Agreements, of the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and many of the largest environmental organizations. It's considered common sense. And if you have heard of any mainstream politician saying something other than this, please let me know, because I haven't heard it. In our book, we argue that green growth is based in the logic of colonization and extraction. The logic that has gotten us to this point of possible ecological collapse. I can't possibly summarize this argument in this short time that I'm going to have to present this, but I'm just going to give you a taste of what we talk about in one portion of the book, and then Sarah is going to speak about another part of the message of the book. So we say green growth is not just. The green energy transition demands incredibly large amounts of copper, lithium, and rare earth minerals. Copper alone is predicted to grow the demand for copper is predicted to grow nearly 600% by 2030. All of this is spurring a 21st century version of a gold rush, which we know something about here, right? Or an oil boom. Countries are vying for these precious minerals. Billionaires like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates are pouring millions of dollars into corporations that are scouring the globe, including the ocean floor, for lithium, copper, nickel, and cobalt. And more than half of the minerals are on or near indigenous or peasant lands. That's a science article that talks about this. Half of these minerals are on or near indigenous or peasant lands. Mining is incredibly destructive of the lands and waters around it. And this minerals rush is just another form of colonization. I have friends from the Democratic Republic of Congo who talk about this has been going on in their country for a very long time, and it is just increasing with the need for cobalt. This is why our coalition is acting in solidarity with a bunch of different people, but the San Carlos Apache, who are seeking to protect their sacred lands of Oak Flat near Phoenix from a copper mine that would literally obliterate these lands. They would actually sink a crater a mile deep. And it would use the mine would use 6.5 billion gallons of water every year to operate. This is in a land that is water scarce. We also argue that green growth is not realistic. Now, it is going to be very difficult to completely electrify our economies, which is necessary for this quote-unquote green transition to happen. This isn't widely known how difficult this is going to be. One statistic that I came across as I was writing this book that my editor asked me about 5 different times because she really didn't believe it. The share of electricity in total final energy consumption globally is 20%. That's that top graph. So that turquoise piece of the pie is the amount of total final energy consumed that is electricity. You'll see other things come from oil, gas, and coal, the burning of those. This pie, this 20% of the pie that's turquoise, includes electricity generated by fossil fuels, which is what you see at the bottom of that pie. Actually, it's a little bit, you can't quite see it because of the screen sharing sign, but what it shows is that we're still, of the 20% of electricity that is used, that is consumed, the vast majority of it is still generated by fossil fuels. So we have to actually electrify the electric supply. And then we still have 80% that we've got to electrify, that we've got to convert from these other fuels. So is it really going to be possible to fly jet engines on electricity stored in onboard batteries? Many engineers say they don't know that this is ever going to be possible, and if it is, it's decades away. What about container ships? Can you propel a container ship using only electricity? We do not have that technology right now, and as many of you know, practically everything we touch or have in our homes probably came off a container ship. We still have no way, a green way, quote unquote, of producing what Canadian material scientist Vaclav Smil calls the 4 pillars of industrial civilization, which is steel, cement, plastics, and ammonia, which is what we use in industrial agriculture. We don't have any scalable, easy way of doing any of those things using making any of those things using electricity. And manufacturing those 4 materials alone causes 25% of all CO2 emissions from fossil fuel combustion. So fossil fuels are deeply embedded within our industrial civilization, much more so than we realize. We're very dependent upon them. So now, decarbonizing our existing economy is challenging enough, given everything I've said. Now imagine we're going to decarbonize while we keep growing our economy. If we grow our economy at 2 to 3% annually, which is considered a healthy rate of growth and a desired rate of growth, we will more than double its size in 23 years. So now we're trying to decarbonize an economy twice as big as the one we have. And in another 20 years after that, it's going to be 4 times as big as the one we have right now. So when my 20-year-old son is about retirement age, the economy is going to be 400% larger than the one we currently have. As one ecological economist said, this is like trying to decarbonize an economy that keeps growing is like trying to shovel sand into a hole that keeps expanding. We also say green growth is limited. And what we mean by this is that green growth actually exacerbates what we claim in the book is the real underlying problem, which is ecological overshoot. This is actually a somewhat old graphic. It comes from 2012, so that big footprint you see on the right, where it says that we are continuing to basically exceed Earth's biocapacity by 156%. That was from 2012, so you can only imagine where we're at right now. So I want to say just a little bit more about ecological overshoot, because this understanding this concept kind of rocks the way I view the world. What I came to realize is climate change is only one symptom of the real threat, which is this ecological overshoot. And overshoot occurs when humans, or really any species actually, uses resources in their environment faster than they can be replaced, or when they dump waste into their environment faster than the ecosystem can assimilate it. And so we obviously have carbon dioxide pollution, but we also have groundwater being depleted. This is from an article about a year ago. We have overfishing. We have soils being eroded and stripped of their nutrients, and there's now a nitrogen and phosphorus crisis from industrial agricultural chemicals that's producing, among other things, algae blooms and dead zones in our waters. We have expanding deserts. We have shrinking tropical forests. We have a crisis of per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAs. This is starting to get more press, even in just the 2 years since I put together this presentation. These forever chemicals that are toxic to humans and basically don't leave the environment. And then, of course, there's the biodiversity crisis, which I know many of us are aware of, and also just this overall shrinking of animal populations. There has been a 69% decrease in the overall population of all critters, insects, mammals, fish, and reptiles since 1970. And possibly the more concerning of those statistics is our insects are declining at 2% a year. What happens to pollination when we don't have insects? So the last slide I'm going to show you of the bad news slides is in 2009, a group of scientists gathered in Stockholm to really quantify this concept of ecological overshoot, because they wanted to know what is the safe operating space on this planet for humanity. So they came up with this concept of 9 planetary boundaries that govern the stability and resilience of the Earth system. So starting at the top there, it's climate change, and then to the left, it's biosphere integrity or biodiversity. Then it goes down to land system changes, which just means developing land for human use. Then we go down to the freshwater crisis, depleting fresh waters. At the very bottom there is what's called biogeochemical flows, but it refers to the phosphorus and nitrogen in the environment. Then we go to, so we're doing actually well with ocean acidification, the aerosols, and then the one up there is ozone depletion. And then at the very top, we have novel entities. That's like the forever chemicals. It's the plastics. It's all of that kind of stuff. So initially, when they did this back in, I think the first report came out maybe 2012, we were over on 4 of these 9 planetary boundaries. The green is the safe operating space. Everything that's in the red is in the red. It means we've exceeded the planetary boundary. We were over on 4. They recently, I think in the past year, came out with an update on it. And we're now have overshot in 6 of these areas. In other words, we could solve climate change and still not address the problems of ecological overshoot. As one article on planetary limits said, what we don't know is how long we can keep pushing these key planetary boundaries before combined pressures lead to irreversible change and harm. Think of humanity blindfolded, simultaneously walking toward 9 cliff edges, and you gain some sense of the seriousness and urgency of our situation. Okay, deep breath. So I believe this is the truth. of the predicament in which we find ourselves. We can't keep growing our economy, whether that growth is green or not. We can't keep extracting resources from the earth and dumping waste into the earth systems. This follows the faulty, unjust, and life-denying logic of colonization and extraction. And we must do something different. This is the truth, I believe, that will set us free. And I am done, and Sarah, it's on to you.
Zoom's kind of giving me multiple instructions here: mute and unmute. I think I got it figured out. Good evening, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here. I'm joining you from Tacoma, Washington, the traditional homeland and unceded territory of the Puyallup Nation. Ooh, Sheri, no pressure that I'm supposed to bring the good news. Well, let's see what I can do about that. I've spent time thinking about, as a Tewa woman, and as an assimilated person, a person who grew up in the K-12 school system here in the U.S. and attended university here. I've really spent a lot of time thinking about kind of the competing worldviews of the indigenous cosmology that I've understood and what I've been trained to believe reality is. My elders have taught me that we live in a closed system of mutual dependence. So what is a closed system? It's a system where nothing exits the system and nothing new comes in. So for example, we are dependent on life support systems of air and water and soil. And there is no new soil. We don't get to import it from somewhere else. The soil that we have on the earth is the soil that there is. The water that we depend on is the water that's been here from the start. And there is a cycle, a water cycle, to cleanse that water. But there is no new water if we consume it or pollute it faster than it can be replenished through the water cycle. There's also, same way, no new air, and this is the challenge we're facing with climate change and over carbonization. And so this is a closed system. By the same logic, as we generate toxic waste, as we generate plastics, there's nowhere for it to go. It stays right here with us. That's a closed system. Nothing new in and nothing out. Nothing we generate out. And within this closed system, we are mutually dependent. So everything that I do matters. It has an impact, not just on myself, but on all life. And the same is true for you. We are mutually dependent. We are dependent upon each other, these life support systems. And the interesting thing about this mutual dependence, understanding and really acknowledging this mutual dependence, is that in this web of life to which we belong, I am not the center. Who is at the center of this web? Well, there is no center. I'm not at the center, and neither are you. So everything I do matters, and I'm not the center. This is what I've understood reality to be, the reality of being embedded in a natural system. But that's not the reality that I learned in the assimilation process here in North America. What I learned is that I have to compete for scarce resources, and the most important thing that I can do for myself and my family is to accumulate as much as I can for my security and for the security of my family. And if that is to the detriment of others, too bad. And this is what I've been taught is reality. This is what it means to be an adult, is to acknowledge that my well-being is up to me. And I have to do whatever I have to do to ensure my own well-being. And so this kind of thinking, this individualism, gives rise to violent hierarchy. And that, coupled with this understanding an economy and an economic model of extraction, that is to say, colonization, a logic, extractive logic that has built an economy based on the idea of, well, dominion, that it is appropriate and just for those with power to extract whatever they want from the earth and from the human populations, assuming that all that is within creation is an inexhaustible resource. So that's what I learned in school. That's what I learned as an assimilated person, that's what reality is. And that idea of individualism, of competition, of perpetual growth, all of that logic absolutely runs counter to the logic that I've learned from my elders. We are in a closed system of mutual dependence, interdependence, right? Well, they're mutually exclusive. They can't both be true. And so at this stage, dealing with the climate change that we're dealing with, we are, many of us for the first time, being forced to realize that perhaps Indigenous people have understood this, what they've understood to be reality may be right from the start, which is this idea of interdependence, mutual dependence. We are dependent on life support systems that are exhaustible. And one of the things that's so strange about the green economy is this idea that in order to stop putting carbon in the air, we have to extract different resources that are going to absolutely pollute the aquifer. That feels like a logic of diminishing returns. And historically, in our world, resources have come out of poorer regions and traveled to the West, and waste has traveled out of the West to poorer regions, so that folks here in North America haven't really had to deal with this reality. And we're now at a situation of saturation where that's no longer the case. Extraction is happening within our own country. And by the way, climate change is not something that is a respecter of borders. So we are all dealing with the consequences of ecological overshoot. And so one of the questions that I was really grappling with in this, in my portion of this shared work with Sheri, is how do we respond? What does it take to imagine another way of living? Various people have said to me over the last couple of years, as Sheri and I have been talking about this work that we embarked on together. Well, so do you think that communism is the solution? Do you think that socialism is the solution? And there are critiques of that analysis, why communism wouldn't work, or why socialism wouldn't work, or why they're bad. And for me, the interesting thing about that assessment is that both of those economic systems are also predicated on an idea of perpetual growth and extraction and extractive logic, right? Like, these are, even the things that we think of as the alternative to our economic system are really just an extension of the economic system we already have. So to that end, I really explored capitalism as a system and what it's designed to do. What is capitalism and what was it designed to do? You know, according to The Wealth of Nations, which is this sort of seminal book by Adam Smith, capital, in order for a country to gain wealth, this is in the book, The Wealth of Nations, the best thing that a monarch or sovereign can do is just remove the barriers to individual folks, shippers, people who are producing things, remove the barriers for them to pursue their own self-interest. So according to Adam Smith, if you just remove the barriers to self-interest, the whole nation will benefit from all of these actors pursuing wealth for themselves. And so we have a system in capitalism where the assumption is that, or the unit of analysis is individuals. So individuals are pursuing their self-interest, and the output is profit, right? So individuals pursuing profit. And what this system, it's a very elegant system. What it does very well is produce wealth for individuals. That's what it does. So if you think of it as sort of an elegant system where you have households and firms, and the households provide jobs to firms, and the firms provide goods to households. So we have this sort of loop, reinforcing loop. There are a number of factors that aren't in there. So while capitalism does very well for promoting the good of building profit for individuals and for firms, it doesn't take into account anything that isn't traded on the market. So air, for example, water, well-being, human health, all the things that community, spiritual health, these are things that are meaningless in the marketplace, right? So because they are meaningless in the marketplace, they're not accounted for in the system. And so this is the situation where we find ourselves. So I asked myself, and a lot of other people too, what else is there? I mean, this is one system. We were born into it. We were born into these systems that we're a part of, but they're created by human beings. What else could there possibly be if not this? And so one of the things we embarked upon was really approaching indigenous cosmology with this question. What else is there? What else could we base a society on other than pursuing profit for individuals? So for example, what would our hospital system look like if its purpose was not to earn wealth for individuals? What if our hospital system were designed to produce well-being for communities? How about our prison system? What if our prison system was not designed to generate wealth for individuals? What if our prison system was designed to produce well-being for communities, for example? How about our education system? How would our world change? How would it be arranged differently if we had different unit of analysis and a different output? And so, yeah, I was really spending time theorizing about this in our book. And since then, we have embarked on this project of asking Indigenous thought leaders to really consider this question, to pick it up and move it around based on Indigenous cosmology, which is a different way of knowing, a different way of thinking. What else could you base a society on? What else could you base an economy on? And the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery has launched a lecture series where we're really asking Indigenous leaders across various sectors to entertain this question. People who are experts in economic development, people who are experts in government, in art, in spirituality, people who are community leaders. What else, based on your cosmology, how could we build a society Here's a thought. I used to teach sociology at a university on the Yakima Reservation, and I would draw a line across my whiteboard. So it would be completely across an entire wall, draw a line and say, okay, here's 10,000 years. Let's assume this is 10,000 years, this line. And let's say that this is recent human history. So we have some kind of written language for 10,000 years. So let's say that human beings have been like we are, with these bodies, these emotions, this experience. We've had human beings like us for 10,000 years. How long have we had universal electrification? That is to say, in the United States, that the Industrial Revolution has taken us to a place where we have electricity even in rural areas, universal electrification. When did that come about? Well, say at the end of World War II, let's say 1950, we had universal electrification. Well, how long has that been? Let's see, it's 2025, so 75 years. Let's say we've had that for 75 years. This idea that we would live in an environment, this created environment, like the environment that we live in now, that this is reality, is a really strange idea when you think about it across 10,000 years. This is quite a strange experiment, actually. Human beings have not been living this way for very long. How have human beings been living? In fact, I was thinking about that too, and just thinking about, I'm not very old. I'm 51 years old. Well, so I'm still young, right? And I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, without an air conditioner. Imagine that there was no air conditioning in my home when I was growing up, and somehow we lived through that. Somehow we endured that. I remember television with 3 channels. I mean, do others of you remember that? This idea that we should and will and must be able to identify objects that we want to own and buy them with one click and have them on our doorstep within 24 hours is a very strange idea. It's a new idea, and it's breaking the world. It's breaking the world. So some of the questions that we put forward in our work together, Sheri and me, we're really asking, what is the world that we want to live in? We have only to imagine it, and then we can build it. We can do that together collectively. And we must do that, because going on the way that we have been is not only unsustainable and foolish, but we just simply can't. We're now being faced with a situation where we're not going to be able to go on the way that we have been going on. And it's going to take all of us working together to imagine another way of inhabiting this beautiful sacred earth and building systems that comply with reality with a capital R, a reality that is consistent with the life support systems at our disposal. And so, as a Mennonite woman and a Christian woman, here's an idea that has really appealed to me, given the cosmology that I've been taught by my elders. Is it possible for us to join our life energy to the life energy of the Spirit of life, the Holy Spirit, in embodying God's dream for creation? In Christianity, the faith tradition of Christianity, we call this establishing the kingdom of God. It's our mandate to do that, actually. And I wonder this all the time. Every generation has the opportunity to establish that kingdom of God. Will we do it in this generation? Will we choose to do that, embody that? Or will we punt? Will we continue to load future generations with the responsibility, taxation without representation, with a cost that is incurred on them, but they themselves did not incur. Yeah, I'll end there. Look forward to the discussion.
Gabe, can I use this for a second? Great, thank you. Wow, this is really good. I'm telling you, please read the book if you haven't already. Maybe some of you have. I'm a little off my game tonight, and I realized that I didn't start with a land acknowledgement. So I'm going to back up and do that because we have those here on a regular basis. And then we're going to open it up to questions. And I see people here who have been part of making this, this event happen tonight. I also didn't mention the work of the Yolo Interfaith Alliance for Climate Justice, and I'm really, really grateful for that. So when you want to ask a question, I hope you'll introduce yourself so we can also all get to know each other better. So this is the land acknowledgement that we generally use here. We acknowledge the land on which we are gathered. For thousands of years, the land has been the home of the Patwin people. Today, there are 3 federally recognized Patwin tribes: Cachel-Dihi Band of Wintun Indians of the Calusa Indian Community, Quetzal-Dihi Wintun Nation, and Yocha-Dihi Wintun Nation. The Patwin people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries. It has been cherished and protected as elders have instructed the young through generations. We are honored and grateful to be here today on their traditional lands. That last point about maybe needing a different framework, a different cosmology even perhaps, to help us live into a different way of life was so powerful to me. There are also many kind of technical questions I've thought about as I've been preparing for tonight. I'll just ask one question before I open it to the floor, and I think it's about that, the critique that you have about green growth, which is so well argued in the book, and it is a lot, and I know you wrote it about 2 years ago. Things have not gotten better since then. I'm wondering, as we sort of face, you said, you know, the truth will set you free. So the truth of the way the world is now, even different than it was a few months ago. With all the difficulty we have in getting people just to even be okay with the idea of a green transition, and the number of people who haven't even thought yet about a just transition, how are you dealing? I'm imagining you're getting pushback around this. Like, well, this is what we know how to do. We got to do something. What I hear is your issue isn't with the green part, it's with the growth part. And I am 100% with you on that. But maybe I'm still trying to cling to the paradigm that I know. So just help me through those of us who've been trying to make change in this space that we know, and now realizing even that's not enough. Where do we go with this?
So Gabe, I'm assuming, but I know Sarah's going to have something to say to this also, but I guess I'll, yeah, we are getting pushback. In fact, we just, in the Mennonite Church did a book study of this, and we were there, and one of our friends who heads up the Anabaptist Climate Collaborative said, especially in the climate where, the political climate we're in right now, he didn't quite say it this way, but it was almost like, isn't the message of this book actually kind of dangerous? I think the problem is that you're right, the critique is of growth, but it also is a critique of what we're defining as green. Because the reality is there's nothing green about the mining that's going to need to happen. in order to make this energy transition happen. One scientist said we climate change how did he put it? Let me see if I can remember it. Climate change is and the putting of carbon dioxide into the air is an assault on the air, but mining is an assault on the land and the water. So I think it's also a questioning of what are we calling even green? And the problem is that we can solve one problem, which is maybe not putting quite as much carbon dioxide emissions into the air while creating other problems. Now, of course, the question is like, well, what are we supposed to do about this? And I think Sarah might disagree, we might not agree on this one. If you can do some mining in accordance with the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, where you basically get free and fair, informed, and I'm missing one of those, consent, thank you, from the groups where you want to do mining, I guess that would be one thing. We're of course not doing that. I believe that we probably are going to need some solar, wind, etc. I just think this idea that this is the thing we have to do now is just really flawed for the reasons I just said. I am now going to see if Sarah might want to speak to that. And I'm ending, Gabe, and Sarah's on.
Zoom won't let me unmute, and then it insists that I unmute. Okay. Oh, okay. So here's one shift that I would like for you to consider. I always think it's interesting how Jesus spoke in parables. And, you know, Jesus was really trying to, I don't know, what hubris for me to say what Jesus was trying to do. So from my point of view, Jesus is, like many holy teachers, is trying to get us to jump up a level in our understanding of things. So let's see if I can get you all to jump up a level in terms of understanding something. Friends, hear me. Your identity in this world is not as consumers. You are not consumers. That is not who you are. That is the hypnosis of systems of death telling you that that's who you are and that is your identity on this earth. That is not your identity. You are eternal, spiritual beings. I've been taught by my mentor that each one of us has a spirit with the magnitude of a star. And yet we believe that the only way that we can have an impact on this world is through our consumption. Will I put solar panels on my house or not? Will I buy an electric car or not? That is not your impact on this world. The society that we live in, the systems that we live with, were created by human beings. Are we not women and men that we can create a different one? I think we are, and we could do that through collective action. This idea of green growth is saying, hey, you know what? In order for us to lessen carbon emissions and keep a healthy economy, all we have to do is build more stuff. That's a crazy idea. Do you understand how that is so maddening to me? You know, at what point did having too many cars, right? We're talking about that. We're burning fossil fuels. In what universe is the solution more cars? Why would we think that more cars are going to solve the problem of too many cars? It doesn't make any sense. We must determine a new way, and maybe not a new way, a various way, a way at variance from what we're doing now to live. And we must do it quickly. And so, I mean, those of us who are ready to do this now must do it now. You know, by the way, capitalism didn't come about because everyone in the world took a vote and said, hey, we're all going to do capitalism together. That is not how it worked. We have to start behaving in a way that is reasonable and realistic. We have to conceive of that way together and build it together. We in the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery are in the midst of that. We are working hard to articulate these are the structures that need to be in place. And then we're going to attempt to build them. And I hope that you're going to join us. I personally, in the Coalition, we have a 100-year plan for dismantling the systems of oppression that seek to destroy my people and all of creation, by the way, which means your people too. We have a plan that spans multiple generations to do that, understanding that it's going to take all of us doing that over multiple generations in order to live in a different way. And we better get started. I mean, this is urgent. It's urgent right now. It was urgent in the 1970s. It's only more urgent now. And so I think the idea that we have to, that we're paralyzed and stymied because we're controlled by a 24-hour news cycle or by a 4-year election cycle, that's not reality. Reality is we are embedded in natural life support systems, and we have to live within those. So Sheri, you said, that I would probably disagree with you that any mining would be bad. I am for reasonable solutions, taking into account the human and natural impact of resource extraction. If we're going to have sacrifice zones, then we have to form some agreements about how sacrifices are going to be made. Right now, what's happening so that Americans can drive electric cars, here's what's happening. People in the Andes who are living on the sacred lands where lithium is are being disappeared, incarcerated, tortured while incarcerated. Those land and water protectors that are trying to protect their homelands and their communities are being hurt, killed, incarcerated, disappeared, so that Americans can drive electric cars. Why do we want to come up with a whole new fleet of cars? Can we not imagine a world where we have shared transportation systems? Okay, that's my response.
You know what, I guess I want to just talk about my own response. I mean, my response is with the Coalition, but I want to stand with those people who are protecting land and water, and that is what we do in the Coalition. I want to imagine new systems that tap Indigenous wisdom and other wisdom, but tap Indigenous wisdom. We are doing that. And I think also I know you all here in Davis, there are so many ways to advocate for, like, instead of us all driving electric cars, what about having really good public transportation, which I understand you probably actually have pretty good public transportation here. Okay, but it could be better. There are so many ways of working for even just things like having adequate transportation, having regenerative agriculture. You all know this stuff. And we have to keep imagining. So there's concrete things we can do right now. I have decided I am not going to spend my life's energy trying to affect the green energy, make the electric transition happen and encourage people to buy electric cars. I actually have one, it's used, but I bought it used. But for me, it's a process of where do I want to put my life energy? Where do I want to put my star energy? And this is where I want to put my energy in the ways I've just described.
All right. Dan.
Well, I'm Dan Smith. I'm the pastor at Lutheran Church of the Incarnation. Thank you for the presentation. This is a very important topic. It seems to me the issue among many, which you're pointing out well, is a disordered relationship to creation. And I'm wondering, this is part of kind of like a big interest of mine. What is it about the call of Christ and being disciples of Jesus, in your view, that calls us to reform our imagination about what it means to be human, where we belong, our sense of place, and how we live out our faith?
Well, Well, I want to have Sarah speak to this too. You know, we have a theological and biblical reflections throughout the book, and one of the ones that I draw on that I continue to just deepen into is the whole creation story of we are created from the dust of the ground. We are Adam. We are Adamah. I'm going to get my Hebrew mixed up here. We are earth. Basically, the Hebrew word is we are dirt creatures. We are earthlings. And even the word human comes from the word humus. So even our other languages recognize that essential connection to the earth. We are earthlings, we are made from the earth, and the whole creation story has beautifully lays that out. I also, believe that Jesus came to call us to co-create and build the kingdom of God on earth with him. And that the kingdom of God is one where we live in right relationship with creation, with each other, with God, and with ourselves. And that is what I believe that is what this work is about, is how do we imagine and co-create with the divine the kingdom of God here on earth. That is just a very short answer to that. I could say a lot more. Sarah?
Oh, thank you. And I'm always so honored to co-present with you, Sheri. Sheri is a national leader and a seminary trained pastor. Sheri, you should probably be the one responding to this, but since you asked, I'm going to give you my point of view. So Luke chapter 4. Jesus is at the beginning of his ministry. He's just coming out of the desert where he's been tempted by the accuser. His very first public appearance is in the synagogue, and he reads from the prophet Isaiah. And he says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's anointed me to bring good news to the poor." And he announces what that good news is. That good news is release for the captive, without any qualifications. Not release for the captives that I identify with, who's probably innocent. Release for the captives, sight for the blind, liberation for the oppressed, and the announcement of the year of our Lord's favor, which is Jubilee, the return of land to the dispossessed. Okay, so he's reading from the prophet Isaiah. The radical things he says is what's next. He says, today in your hearing, this prophecy is fulfilled. So he speaks with authority. He says, I'm the one, I'm here to do that stuff. Whew, mic drop, right? Whoa. And then he goes about his ministry, doing all of those things, embodying that idea of justice and peace, embodying justice and peace. Then he dies and he's resurrected and he's with his disciples. And he says to them, all authority of heaven and earth has been given to me. And I'm sharing it with you. And therefore go unto all nations and baptize people, make disciples, baptize people in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Share that authority as broadly as possible. Completely sharing this authority, right? All authority of heaven and earth has been given to me, and I'm giving it, sharing it with you. Is our mandate, not the mandate of Jesus. Release for the prisoner, sight for the blind, freedom for the oppressed, the announcement of the year of our Lord's favor. At one point, will we pick up that mandate and actually embody it, Quit giving it a nod, but say, this is the hour. It is now. And we're ready. We are ready to embody what we have been called to do.
A seminary trained preacher. She's the preacher.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, to both authors. So my name is NJ, like the initials for New Jersey, but the N stands for Natalie. And I happen to be the chair of the Yolo County Climate Action Commission. I have a colleague of mine here also. And I'm also a believer and a layman minister. So I'm still going through the book. I haven't finished it yet. So I would like to address a little bit the question about the calling of Christ as it relates to climate action, if you'll allow me, and the different mandates that you shared. And I want to share a few words because I'm someone who has been attacked for trying to raise awareness when it comes to the climate crisis and encourage people to do better. And the most vicious attacks have been from Christians. And I've been told that I'm a puppet of politicians, that basically I'm doing their biddings, etc., etc. And since I was, this was coming from Christians, so we talked about the Bible, and I had to explain where I'm coming from and why I do the work that I do. So I'm African. I was born in Europe, but I grew up on the African continent. And over there, interdependence with nature is how we do life. So all African countries are very young. They became independent in the 60s, 1960 for most of them, meaning that everyone from my generation, we all come from a village. I grew up living both in the city, and when there was no school in session, I was in my village in the middle of the equatorial forest, no current, water, electricity, waking up at 5 in the morning and at 6 going to the rivers to fetch water for the day. And the animal proteins that we'll have, whether it's fish or the sort of animals, is because the adults will go hunting or they will go fish. But they will make sure to tell us we only take what we need. And they will actually say a prayer, as I was told, to thank the animal that had just died at their hands, said, my family will get to live thanks to you. I'm sharing all of that again because I'm also someone who comes from a lineage of missionaries. And this is where the mandate come in for me. And this is how I fell in that activism pod as a kid. So when it comes to environmental, I want to say justice. For me, the Bible is very clear on three main big topics. So you mentioned those. In the Garden of Eden, just from the beginning, book of Genesis, God is very clear, and he's asking who will listen to him and his creation, us, take care of this world that I created. So we are already tasked in caring for our environment and taking care of it. So that's the number one thing I like to share with other believers when they're asking why I do this, and nature is nature and will keep on being nature. Nothing of what is happening is out of the extraordinary. It's just nature being nature. I was like, you still need to care because this is what the Bible says. And then we ask also, and this is Jesus himself telling us, love your neighbor as yourself, right? Which means we are being called to care for each other, which means, again, our environment plays a role in there, because if we are mistreating our environment, it has an impact on the community. And sometimes we need to break it down in ways where people understand it, how it impacts their daily lives. Air quality, for example. Asthma levels going, higher. Where we decide to have factories, why many of them tend to be in poor neighborhoods, and how the health of people are being affected. Water quality is another one of them. What do we do to keep, the authorities responsible for that, for water management, accountable? How hard are we asking for transparency? And so on and so on. So this is when it comes to the community aspect and Christ calling. And then the last one, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 19, says that our body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. And when we say love your neighbor as yourself, we tend to forget the part about loving ourselves, right? So we have a mandate to take good care of our human body, but that also is linked to how we care for environment. So this is what I wanted to share, and I thank you so much for writing the book. Thank you for coming tonight. I think there is at least one more pastor in attendance. I'm not going to call him out, but you have quite a few leaders here tonight. So I look forward to everything we are learning from you and the tools and the book. Hopefully we can take it to our communities and continue the conversation.
Oh, thank you so much, NJ. I was going to say, I think we have another preacher here in the audience. So thank you so much for sharing both your experience growing up and for many of us, for me, it was maybe 2 generations before when the few people in my family were doing something similar. As I think Sarah said so well, we have this idea that this is normal, the way we're living, but there are so many other ways of living. And then I also just really appreciated the particular Bible passages that you call upon to speak to other people who need to see directly in the Bible where this mandate is coming from to do this work. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, NJ. I'm so glad you're here tonight. I don't know if we have questions from online. No, so we probably have time for at least one more question here.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, NJ, for really bringing us together. You were the catalyst and the community builder. And so we have NJ to thank for our presence here tonight in this circle. Yes, applause. My name is Juliet Beck. I think a fair number of you know me, but I wanted to share a little bit about how I have been doing everything I possibly can to integrate what you've heard tonight at our local bioregional level here in our neck of the woods. And that starts with that concept of the bioregion, right? So being in Patwin-Wintun territory was interconnected, this whole Delta region. And we in Yolo County have these 2 creeks, the Cache Creek and Puda Creek, that feed the Sacramento River and create this abundance. And so, getting connected to these layers of history here and unpacking and kind of tearing back the layers of colonization in this land has been a journey that I invite everyone into this work because it's so enlightening. And we do have incredible partners here in this region, Wintun culture bearers, Indigenous people who are bringing their practices to share with us, to recreate these economies. And in fact, one of the gifts of last year was this gift of this marsh, the concept of the marsh economy. We can build and we can weave together an economy built on what should be here, is still in the soil of the land here and in the waters. And the spirit of the land is perhaps this metaphor of the marsh economy, but it's the service economy. It's everything you're mentioning, the values. And we can reweave these. I totally believe, and I see it every day, strands of this new web, of the web being repaired and the web being strengthened. Robin Wall Kimmer just wrote The Service Berry, and that is a wonderful synopsis as well along these lines. So I think the currents are very strong for the transformation that you're describing. I don't think it's out of our reach, and we can call it our just transition, our ecological just transition, our bioregional thinking, mapping our watersheds, healing the waters, uniting the waters, and we have the leadership. We have the leadership, right? And this indigenous sensibility is so important, and the way you describe the importance of justice at the center of all of this. We have opportunities, and we're learning as a community. I really believe we're in a community of practice. I'm with Yolo Soul Collective. We're working on these strands of the web as well, and invite you into that work and all of our offerings. You can check out online. We can talk about it more, but I see a lot of opportunities to build the solidarity economy, a lot of opportunities for the transformation to happen. And I'm on this 10-year deadline. I'm halfway through, right? The century. We're in 2025. And so what we need to do in the next 5 years, there's pathways. There's very clear pathways. The YOLO Climate Action Commission, which Robin has also been part of, gave us this roadmap, an incredible roadmap with the Climate Action Plan that has over 400 actions. So we have already guidance documents. We have spiritual leaders. We have our social infrastructure. And I think, it's these kinds of places and spaces that we can to deepen this work, to be more strategic, to be more intentional, is, I think, right here within our grasp.
Wow, that's another wonderful testimony to what can happen on the local bioregional level when you are working in concert with your indigenous folks and the whole community. That was really so hopeful and inspiring to hear. Thank you. What's the name of where would?
YOLOSOL.org, and it's spelled S-O-L, so YOLOSOL.org. Juliet, come talk to me. We can continue this conversation. We need to continue this.
Yeah. I want to give Sarah a chance to respond too, but I also don't want to, what were you, I think you said there was time for one more question. Sarah, do you want to respond to what Juliet, is that your name? Did I get it right, shared? She says she's fine.
Yeah, thank you all. I just appreciate the journey that you've taken us on in your book, and as well as this evening, in just helping us to understand the origins of the idea, how it's perpetuated, and perhaps what the solutions look like. I find in some ways some of our, and I'm talking our in this room, our in Davis, our in California, one of the barriers that we face is we still have not recognized the role that our country, that we have played in as colonialists, and still continue to play, and are looking to play in even at a bigger scale in coming years. So I really appreciated recognizing in your book, as you put it, colonizing the land perhaps is a more broad way to look at it. We live here, we are beneficiaries of Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley has been the greatest reason to go out and mine silicon around the world. We drive our Teslas, and it's been one of the biggest drivers to go out and mine all these rare earth minerals. So we are beneficiaries of the system in many different ways, and perhaps part of our inertia is that we don't want to rid ourselves of these benefits. We are seeing the rise of AI, and what's AI doing? It's promoting development of data centers all around the world. And where are the data centers being developed? They're being developed in countries that have hydropower. So if you've got a large river, there's a data center coming near you. And the technologies that we rely on essentially we're doing searches online using all those resources. So in as much as we can begin to act in small ways to try to move ourselves, I think it's the barriers to us separating ourselves from the benefits that we're deriving from all of this colonialization is, to me, it appears to be a major challenge. I don't know if you'd like to comment on that.
That was really, really well said.
It really was. So I am going to ask Sarah to talk about this because I think she talks so well about. I am not saying that you are calling for this. We sometimes get people, especially within the Mennonite world, feeling, because simple living and frugality has been a kind of somewhat a part of Mennonite culture, although believe me, it is very much not a part of a lot of Mennonite culture too. And so people will be like, well, we just need to, as individuals, like not do those things. Somehow we need to, I don't know. I mean, there's a guy I'm corresponding with who's up in Ontario who he and his family of 4 people are basically living off the grid and trying to live as simply as possible. And I can almost never communicate with him because he has to go into the library to use the computer. And as much as I respect the great lengths to which this person is going to try to sort of remove himself from this colonial system and its benefits, you could say, and also its horrors, we do not believe that that is what's going to get us to the kingdom of God. Is individuals here and there heroically doing these things that the vast majority of people can't do or are never going to do. So the way I believe the way we address this is through collective action, through collective waking up to the realities you just so eloquently talked about. I remember when I was sitting at my Mennonite regional conference with some folks, everybody there was actually from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they were talking about what cobalt mining is doing in their country. And it just was bringing home to me so painfully what the realities of what you were talking about. This was probably about 10 or 12 years ago. So we need to come together collectively to live differently, imagine different ways of living differently, imagine different economies. I'm not saying that that can't include for some of us withdrawing some of our energy and attention and money from these things, but just us individually doing our thing of trying to live as simply as possible isn't going to make this happen. And I think everybody here probably knows that too. So right now I am definitely still, I guess you could say, benefiting from these systems. I wish to God that AI did not exist. I just don't need, I mean, I was alive, I was born in 1962. I remember what life was like before computers and even like answering machines. And in many respects, I prefer that life to what we have right now. So I guess I'm babbling, so I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna let Sarah speak. Thank you, that was a great question.
So I'm just gonna reiterate what Sheri said. Significant structural change, that means change to laws and policies, is what will change reality. And that is a collective endeavor. It always has been, and it remains a collective endeavor today. So imagine what it would be like if activists sought to bring an end to slavery by holding book groups. Is that going to end slavery by reading good books? No. Is it going to be through, I mean, these small individual level actions are not going to end an institution like that. What will end an entire institution is massive action on the policy level. And so we have to do that. So let me give you an example. We have persistent plastics. This is one of the things that Sheri was talking about. And we say, oh, we have persistent plastics. Plastic is now, it's being expressed in women's breast milk, right? So we know that it's everywhere. It's within the food web. We say, oh, we wring our hands. I'm going to reduce my plastic. I'm not going to use the plastic trash bags anymore. We're going to legislate in our town that we're not going to have plastic trash bags. Okay, that's not bad. Like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but that is not going to, that ain't it. We could, we have a mechanism in our country that determines so much of the reality that we live in. And that is, we call that the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill determines how food is going to be produced and distributed, for example. And if the Farm Bill said, we're not going to use plastics anymore, there's a ban on plastics, plastics no longer going to be used in food production, plastics will no longer be used in food production. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, we did this with aerosol, didn't we? We didn't just wring our hands and say, oh, aerosol, it's so sad how no matter what we do, every generation, we just have more aerosol. No, we just banned aerosol. That's all we did. It is possible to do this. And it's just, we're going to try and do it in the coalition. But my point is, we have to quit wringing our hands. Like, we have to actually collectively move to make the world different. So, for example, can you believe there was a time in this country that there was no such thing as weekends? Did you know that weekends were created by laws? We could do that again. We can have a different world. We don't have to live with it the way it is right now. We can actually say, we're done with cobalt. There's been all the cobalt in the world that we need mined. So, for example, let me give you this example: gold. Why do we need gold? Can I tell you what is more valuable than gold? Poop. Poop is more valuable than gold. Why? With poop, you can grow food. What can you do with gold? There is some, industrial uses we use gold for, but I'm telling you, we have so much gold on the surface. We have no need to mine anymore. It's a hedge. It is a financial hedge. It is symbolic, truly. We don't need to destroy the world for that. We could stop this. We really, really can. We can do it by working together collectively, by insisting on something else. Did you know that there was a time in this country when women could not vote? Do you remember that? I mean, you certainly remember in recent history that, you maybe don't remember it in your lifetime, but it's true. I'm telling you, we could massively move collectively so that our offspring would say, can you believe there was a time when carbon emissions were like this, or when people use fossil fuels? Like, we can actually change the world. We can quit wringing our hands and really do it. We really can. So so many of us in our society have given our consent to warlords, people who are the massive beneficiaries of this colonization. And all we have to do is withdraw our consent. We really can. We really, really can. So here's something controversial and provocative for you all to end our evening together. I want you to consider this. If you were collecting compound interest in some way, in your bank account, in your 401k, whatever, if you are earning compound interest, that is being taken from the earth or from vulnerable persons. And you want to know what? You want to do a good deed as a human, like an individual, as a family, household level? Quit taking compound interest. If you want to withdraw from that. That has an impact. Buying an electric car, that ain't it. Putting a solar panel on your house, no. If you actually at an individual level are committed to this, to decolonization, say no to compound interest. That is a racket, this idea that you deserve to earn money on your money that you did not earn, that decimates indigenous communities and the environment. If you want to act as a consumer, that's the way in my book. But better than that will be to rise up to wake up, like Sheri said, rise up as a collective and insist on justice. Insist. Do you know why we don't insist right now? Because we're beneficiaries. The majority of people, you want to know who's rising up? Indigenous people are rising up and they're protecting lands and waters. Why aren't Christians in the street with them? Why? I'll tell you why. Because most people in the dominant culture are comfortable as beneficiaries. It's possible to stop that and say, oh my gosh, we're going down with this ship. We better change. We better do something else. It is possible for us to do something else. Imagine it and to do it. So I have one more metaphor for you to think about. Do you remember the Titanic, that ship? The Titanic. Let's think about the Titanic for a minute. It hit an iceberg and then it was going to sink. And there were not enough lifeboats for everybody. So who got the lifeboats? The people on the top. You know, the people in first class got the lifeboats. Many of the people, the working class and poorer people, were locked below decks, right? So they couldn't get out. The Titanic is the biggest boat that was ever created. Do you think there was enough material on it? Wood and plaster and all the things. Do you think there was enough stuff there so that nobody had to die? Absolutely there was. There's enough. I mean, it's huge, massive boat. There was enough material that could float that probably everybody could have lived. But the solution for the people in power was to lock all the poor people below decks so that the few privileged would be able to escape on the boats. Who do you think on that boat had the knowledge and the know-how for how to quickly, within 12 hours, transform this luxury boat into stuff that floats to save everyone's life? The people below decks. They knew how to do that. Those are the workers, right? They knew how to do that. We are in that situation right now. And what are we going to do? Are the few of us going to float away on the lifeboats because it's like, oh, well, gee, it's too bad there aren't enough boats, but at least I'll get my boat? Or are we actually going to open up all the doors, call everybody in, and allow the people who have the knowledge and experience, often the people who've been living like us, Indigenous people who've been living with the apocalypse for the last 500 years, maybe know what to do in this situation? That's my suggestion. So consult people who may be able to figure out how to help us survive this.
I think we could continue to unpack this for a really long time, and I hope we do, especially those of you who are in the room here, NJ and Juliet, and you guys are the ones who are going to help us come to these solutions, and we're going to do it together. And I think we just have to start here, and we have to start. Well, we had to have started 500 years ago, but we're going to start now if we haven't already. I hope even just in the next few minutes, the conversation will continue out in the room out there. If you don't have a copy of Sheri's book and Sarah's book, please do avail yourself of that. Do you have either of you have any last little words? Okay. Well, we're so grateful to both of you for being here, for sharing your wisdom, and pushing us to do more and be more, and to change together. So thank you all very much.